Margaret Ellis had always loved the sound of waves crashing against the shore. It was the reason she'd bought the little blue cottage on Siesta Key 25 years ago, right after her divorce from Tom became final. Back then, it was a run-down fixer-upper she could barely afford on a public school teacher's salary, but she saw potential. She painted the exterior herself, soft coastal blue with white trim, replaced the warped floors with wide plank pine, and turned the screened porch into her favorite reading spot. Over the decades, it became her sanctuary, the one place where no one expected anything from her. Now, at 65, retired from teaching high school English in Sarasota, Margaret spent her days exactly as she pleased. Mornings were for coffee on the porch, afternoons for long walks on the sugar-white sand, evenings for books or watercolor painting. She rented the cottage occasionally on Airbnb during the off-season for extra income, but July and August were always hers. No guests, no obligations, just the Gulf breeze and the quiet she'd earned after raising 3 kids mostly alone. That's why on the first Saturday in July 2025, when she pulled into her crushed shell driveway after a morning at the farmer's market and saw her daughter Lauren's white SUV parked crookedly in the shade, her stomach tightened. Lauren was unloading suitcases from the back, 4 large ones, 2 duffels, and what looked like a cooler. Her husband, Brad, was wrestling beach chairs out of the roof rack, while their teenagers, 16-year-old Emma and 14-year-old Jackson, argued over who had to carry the grocery bags. All 4 were in swimsuits and flip-flops, as if they'd already claimed the beach as theirs. Margaret parked her old Honda Civic, took a slow breath, and stepped out. "Mom!" Lauren called, waving with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Surprise! We're here!" Margaret forced a smile as she walked over, arms full of canvas tote bags filled with tomatoes, peaches, and fresh grouper. "I can see that. What's going on?" Lauren wiped sweat from her forehead. "The condo we rented in Clearwater fell through. Mold issue, total nightmare. The rental company refunded us, but everything decent for July is booked solid or insanely expensive, like $3,000 a week expensive. So we thought, why not Grandma's beach house? You always say it sits empty in the summer." Margaret felt the words land like small stones in her chest. Empty, as if the cottage were a resource waiting to be used. Brad gave her a quick side hug, smelling of sunscreen and airport coffee. "Hope it's okay we didn't call ahead. Traffic was brutal and we just wanted to get here before dark. The kids are dying to hit the beach." Emma was already scrolling on her phone, barely glancing up. Jackson dropped a grocery bag on the shell driveway, spilling a bag of chips. Margaret looked at the pile of luggage. Enough for a month, not a weekend. "How long are you planning to stay?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. Lauren laughed, that bright, dismissive laugh Margaret knew too well. "We haven't decided exactly. Maybe the whole month? School doesn't start till mid-August. It'll be like old times, family vacation at the beach." Old times, when the kids were small and Margaret worked 2 jobs to keep the cottage, when Lauren assumed Grandma's house was an extension of her own childhood summers, never considering who paid the taxes, the insurance, the hurricane shutters. Margaret set her tote bags on the porch steps. "Lauren, I wish you'd called. I have plans for July." Lauren blinked. "Plans? Like what?" Margaret hesitated. "How do you explain to your own daughter that your plan was simply to be left alone? That after 40 years of grading papers, attending parent-teacher nights, driving carpools, and saying yes to everyone, your greatest luxury was an empty calendar? I've been looking forward to a quiet month, reading, painting, just resting." Brad chuckled. "Mom, come on, you're retired. You rest every day. Having us here will be fun. The kids can help with chores, we'll grill, go fishing. You won't have to cook if you don't want to." Emma finally looked up. "Grandma, do you have good Wi-Fi? I have summer assignments." Jackson was already heading toward the front door with a suitcase. "Can I have the blue room? It's got the best fan." Margaret felt the familiar pull, the all-too-familiar instinct to smooth things over, to make everyone comfortable, to avoid conflict. But something in her resisted this time. Maybe it was turning 65. Maybe it was the memory of her friend Ruth, who'd spent her last years regretting never saying no. Maybe it was simply exhaustion. She stepped in front of Jackson before he reached the door. "Hold on," she said quietly. "We need to talk about this." Lauren's smile faltered. "Mom, seriously? We drove 6 hours. The kids are exhausted." "I understand that, but this is my home. I wasn't expecting guests, and I'm not prepared to host for a month." Brad frowned. "We're not guests, we're family." The word hung in the humid air like a challenge. Margaret looked at her daughter, 38 years old, successful marketing job, nice house in Atlanta, and felt a wave of something close to grief. When had Lauren seen her mother's life as a backup plan? "Let's go inside," Margaret said. "Put the cold things in the fridge, and we'll talk." They trooped in, filling the small cottage with noise and bodies, and the faint smell of coconut sunscreen. Margaret's peaceful space, white slip-covered sofa, seashell collections, the faint scent of lavender from her diffuser, suddenly felt crowded. While Brad and the kids put groceries away, taking over her kitchen without asking, Lauren pulled Margaret aside on the porch. "Mom, what's going on? You're acting like we're strangers." Margaret leaned against the railing, watching a pelican dive into the turquoise water across the street. "I'm acting like someone who wasn't consulted about a major disruption to her life. You assumed I'd be okay with this because I'm alone and the house is empty. But it's not empty. I live here. This is my full-time home now, not a vacation rental for the family." Lauren crossed her arms. "I thought you'd be thrilled. You always complain you don't see the grandkids enough." "I do see them when we plan visits that work for everyone, not when you show up with a month's worth of luggage and no warning." Lauren's eyes filled with tears, the quick, weaponized kind Margaret remembered from teenage arguments. "I can't believe you're doing this. We have nowhere else to go. Do you want us to sleep in the car?" Margaret felt the old guilt rise, hot and familiar, but she pushed it down. "No, I want you to respect my boundaries. There are hotels on the mainland. Airbnb has last-minute places. You're adults with credit cards. You'll figure it out." Brad appeared in the doorway. "Everything okay out here?" Lauren turned to him, her voice trembling. "Maul's saying we can't stay." Brad's face hardened. "Margaret, come on, we're family. This is what family does, helps each other out." Margaret met his gaze. "Family also asks permission before moving in for a month." The silence stretched, broken only by gulls crying overhead. Finally, Lauren said, "Fine, we'll go to a hotel, but don't expect us to visit much after this." They loaded the SUV in tense silence. The kids complained loudly, Emma about missing the beach, Jackson about sharing a hotel room. Margaret stood on the porch and watched them drive away, shell dust swirling behind the tires. When they were gone, she went inside and sat on her sofa. The cottage felt huge and echoing. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt hollow. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Lauren's hurt expression, Brad's judgment, the kids' disappointment. By morning, doubt had settled in like fog. Maybe I had overreacted. Maybe a month with family would have been nice. Maybe I was becoming the selfish old woman everyone feared turning into. She almost called Lauren to apologize. Instead, she went for a long walk on the beach. The sand was cool under her feet, the Gulf calm and glassy. She thought about all the summers she'd spent here with the kids when they were young, building sandcastles, collecting shells, eating ice cream that melted faster than they could lick it. Lauren had loved this place once. Maybe she still did. Maybe she just didn't know how to ask anymore. Margaret realized something then. She hadn't taught her children to respect her boundaries because she never had any. She'd been the mom who always said yes, who worked overtime to pay for dance lessons and baseball cleats, who hosted every holiday because no one else wanted the work. She taught them that her time, space, and energy were limitless, and now they believed it. The realization didn't make her feel better, it made her feel responsible. Over the next week, Margaret heard nothing from Lauren. No texts, no calls. The silence was worse than anger. She started second-guessing everything. Should she have let them stay for a few days? Compromised? Was her peace worth this rift? On the 8th day, her phone rang. Lauren. She answered with her heart in her throat. "Hi," Lauren said. Her voice was flat. "Hi, honey. We're at the Hyatt place on the mainland. It's fine. Expensive, but fine." Margaret waited. "I've been thinking about what you said, about boundaries, and I realize I didn't even consider asking. I just assumed you'd be okay with it because you always have been." Margaret closed her eyes. "I'm sorry," Lauren said quietly. "That wasn't fair." The apology was small, but it cracked something open in Margaret's